Tennessee is more than country music, rolling hills, and southern charm. Beneath its beauty lies something darker. Whispers of a witch who cursed a family until death. A tunnel where shadows reach out from the walls. A stalker in the Appalachian woods who leaves behind gifts no one should ever find. And a mansion, its floors still soaked with the blood of thousands of soldiers. 4 stories, 4 nightmares, all born from Tennessee's soil. But here's the warning. Once you hear them, you can't unhear them. And the deeper you go, the closer the dark gets. So, which story will claim your sleep tonight? What if the thing haunting your home didn't just whisper in the dark, but promised to kill you? For one family in rural Tennessee, that nightmare became reality. Their haunting lasted for years, terrorized their children, and eventually ended in death. This is the chilling legend of the Bell Witch. The story begins in 1817. John Bell, a farmer, lived with his wife and children in a log cabin on a stretch of fertile land in Robertson County, near the Red River. Life was simple. Days were spent working the fields. Nights were quiet, spent by the fire, telling stories, sharing food, listening to the soft sounds of crickets in the Tennessee woods. But late that summer, something disturbed the peace. One night, John Bell heard scratching beneath the wooden floorboards. At first, he thought it was a rat or maybe a stray animal. He set traps, searched for holes, nothing. But the noises grew louder. Soon, the scratching became knocking. Heavy, deliberate raps against the cabin walls, always at night, never with a source. Before long, the knocking turned to whispers. The family would wake to hear voices murmuring in the dark. At first, they were faint, too soft to understand. But night after night, the whispers grew clearer, until the family swore they could hear their own names being called. And then one night, the entity revealed itself. It spoke in a distinct, chilling voice. It called itself Kate, and Kate had a mission. She despised John Bell. She swore she would kill him. From that moment, terror ruled the Bell household. The children became targets first. Invisible hands slapped their faces. Their hair was yanked until they screamed. Bite marks appeared on their skin. The family begged for help. But neighbors who came to witness the events claimed to hear the same voices, to see the same horrors. Word spread. Soon the Bell Witch was the talk of Robertson County. Locals came to see the haunting with their own eyes, and most left terrified. Visitors claimed they heard mocking laughter, scripture recited in a woman's voice, even full conversations spoken by something no one could see. The witch grew bolder. She taunted John Bell relentlessly, calling him names, cursing him, predicting his death. The family's nights were filled with shrieks, chains dragging across the floor, the sounds of animals growling outside, though none were ever found. The haunting grew so infamous that even a man who would one day be President of the United States came to witness it, Andrew Jackson. He and his men traveled to Adams, Tennessee, curious about the stories. But when their carriage approached the Bell farm, it suddenly stopped. The horses refused to move. The wheels locked tight, as though held by an unseen force. The men struggled, cursed, tried to push it forward, but nothing worked. Then, a disembodied voice rang out, taunting them. Moments later, the carriage jolted free. Shaken, Jackson declared, "By God, this must be the witch," and left the property, refusing to spend the night. But the Bells couldn't leave. This was their home, and Kate wasn't finished. By 1820, John Bell's health began to fail. He grew weak, slipping in and out of consciousness. His medicines, carefully prepared, were mysteriously tampered with. One morning, the family found a strange vial filled with black liquid, where his medicine should have been. They swore they had never seen it before. On December 20th, 1820, John Bell was found dead. And that morning, as the family mourned, a voice echoed through the house, cold, mocking, familiar. It said, "I gave him the poison." The funeral was no escape. Hundreds attended, but witnesses claimed that even during the burial, the voice of Kate the Witch rang out, laughing as John Bell was lowered into the ground. The sound carried across the fields, leaving mourners shaken. After Bell's death, the witch's activity slowed. Some say her mission was complete, others say she still lingers. In fact, in the years that followed, locals swore they saw strange lights in the woods. Whispers carried on the wind, shadows moving between the trees when no one was there. Today the legend lives on. The Bell Witch Cave, located near the original property, has become a place of pilgrimage for the curious and the brave. Visitors claim to hear whispers in the darkness. Some report being pushed, scratched, or touched by cold hands. A few say they saw a pale figure flickering in the corner of their vision, vanishing when they turned their head. And perhaps the most unsettling part is this. The Bell Witch herself swore she would return. Some accounts say she promised to come back to Adams in 107 years. That would have been in 1935. According to some locals, strange things did happen that year. Unexplained lights, odd illnesses, eerie voices. Others say the witch never left at all. For over 200 years, the Bell Witch has been whispered about, feared, and passed down through generations. A story of a haunting so powerful, it became legend. And the question remains, who or what was Kate? A restless spirit? A curse tied to the land? Or something darker, beyond explanation? Would you dare to spend a night in the Bell Witch Cave? Or would you, like Andrew Jackson, leave before the sun went down? What would you do if your car stalled in the middle of a pitch-black tunnel and you heard footsteps approaching, even though you knew you were completely alone? In Kingsport, Tennessee, there's a tunnel locals don't dare to drive through at night. They say it's cursed. They say it's haunted. And they say if you go in, something inside might not let you leave. This is the legend of the Sensabaugh Tunnel. The story begins in the early 1900s. Edward Sensabaugh was a wealthy man, known throughout Kingsport as both respected and feared. But behind closed doors, stories whispered that he was cruel. Some said he was quick to anger. Others said his home held dark secrets. The most enduring legend is that one night, in a fit of madness, Edward Sensabaugh murdered his own family. Some versions say he drowned his wife and children in the tunnel's stream. Others claim he lured travelers inside, robbing and killing them, leaving their bodies to rot in the darkness. No matter which story you hear, they all end the same. The tunnel became cursed, forever stained by the blood spilled within its walls. From then on, the Sensabaugh Tunnel became a place people avoided after dark. Strange sounds echoed inside when no one was there. Crying infants, whispers that grew louder the deeper you walked. Some swore they saw figures standing at the far end of the tunnel, only for them to vanish as they approached. But the most terrifying part comes to those who dare to drive through. Local dare games say that if you pull your car into the center of the tunnel, cut the engine and sit in silence, you'll hear it, footsteps circling your vehicle, sometimes heavy breathing right outside your window. And if you're unlucky, the car won't start again. More than one person has claimed to see handprints appear on the fogged glass of their windows, pressed from the outside, even when no one was there. There are darker stories too. People claim they've been shoved by unseen hands, dragged by something in the stream, or followed home by a shadow that wasn't there before they entered. Some locals believe it's the spirit of Edward himself, patrolling his tunnel, making sure no one escapes without fear. Others swear it's the children he murdered, their cries echoing forever. And while skeptics insist it's nothing more than acoustics and imagination, the stories keep piling up. Paranormal investigators who've entered the tunnel describe their equipment failing, cameras shutting off, batteries drained. Some leave shaking, refusing to ever go back. One chilling account tells of a group of teenagers who went in laughing, headlights blazing. They cut the car and waited, just like the legend said. At first it was silence, then tap, tap, tap. 3 sharp knocks on the roof of the car. They screamed, scrambled to start the engine, and when they finally burst out into the night air, they looked back. Their rear window was covered in tiny, wet handprints. Today, the Sensabaugh Tunnel still stands. Locals still warn outsiders not to test the stories. And if you ask anyone who grew up in Kingsport, they'll tell you, the fastest way to prove your courage is to spend a night in that tunnel. But very few ever make it past a few minutes inside. So would you drive through the Sensabaugh Tunnel alone at midnight? Or would you, like most who know the stories, turn around before the darkness swallows you? If this tale gave you chills, subscribe and follow. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now let's get into the next story. Imagine this. You're camping deep in the Appalachian Mountains, alone. The fire burns low. The woods are silent. The night air presses in like a weight. And then, you hear it. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Circling your tent. Too heavy to be an animal. Too steady to be random. What would you do? This is the story of one hiker who thought he was prepared for anything the mountains could throw at him. But what he found out there wasn't a storm or a wild animal. It was something far worse, something that stalked him and left behind gifts no one should ever find. He wasn't a novice. He had spent years hiking, climbing, pushing himself into the wilderness. For him, the mountains weren't dangerous. They were home. That autumn, when the leaves burned crimson and gold, he set out for a solo trip in the high country of eastern Tennessee. Before he left, a co-worker pulled him aside. Strange things happen in those hills. People vanish. He laughed it off. Ghost stories, he thought. Every town has them. Still, would you? Would you go alone, knowing others had vanished in the same woods? The first day was perfect. Crisp air, leaves crunching beneath his boots, the smell of pine on the wind. He didn't see another soul. By nightfall, he had pitched his tent, cooked his dinner, and sat under the stars with the crackle of a small fire for company. But that night the woods were too quiet. No owls, no crickets, no rustle of leaves, just silence pressing in like a heavy blanket. He told himself not to think about it. Then snap, a branch broke just beyond the firelight. He froze. Flashlight in hand, he scanned the trees. Nothing, just endless dark. At sunrise, he stepped out of his tent and stopped cold. Something had been left for him. A small bundle of sticks tied neatly together with twine. The second night, the silence felt heavier. He lay awake, staring at the thin fabric of his tent, every sound magnified. And then, whispering, faint, carried on the wind, not words he could understand, but words meant for him. When dawn came, there was another gift. This time a child's shoe, old, dirty, stiff with age. Would you leave then? Or would curiosity hold you in place? He stayed. The third day, the gifts grew darker. A dead bird laid across his backpack. On a nearby tree, a strange symbol carved deep into the bark. And tied carefully around the trunk was something that made his stomach twist. A strand of his own hair. That night, he didn't even try to sleep. He sat by the fire, knife in hand, heart pounding in his throat. And then he heard them. Steps, slow, measured, circling his tent, round and round. The canvas dipped inward. A hand pressed against the fabric, dragging slowly downward. He snapped, bursting out of the tent with his knife. The clearing was empty. At dawn, he packed quickly and left. Every step felt like something was behind him, every tree a watcher, and then he saw it. In the middle of the trail was a small pile of stones, stacked carefully. On top was his camping journal, the one zipped inside his pack. When he opened it, his hands shaking, he saw the last page was gone, torn out. He never returned to those mountains. But the story spread, whispered like smoke through Tennessee. Some say the Appalachian Stalker is an ancient spirit that marks intruders with gifts. Others believe it's a predator, human or otherwise. But the truth is, no one really knows. Months later, 2 college students heard his story, and they laughed. They weren't hikers. They weren't prepared, but they were curious. And curiosity in those mountains can get you killed. They set out in spring with little more than backpacks, flashlights, and a phone to record. From the first night, things went wrong. The woods grew quiet the moment the fire died. Not silence of sleep, silence of listening. They joked about it until one of them spotted something outside their tent. A bundle of sticks tied together with string. The next night brought another gift, a torn scrap of leather, the sole of a child's shoe. Still, they stayed. And then, the gifts got personal. Outside their tent lay a page, torn from a notebook, the missing page from the hiker's journal. His frantic handwriting, "It knows my name." That night they sat in the dark, shaking, fire burning low. And then came the steps, slow, steady, circling the tent. A hand pressed against the canvas. The flashlight flicked on. and they screamed, because there was no prankster, no animal, just a shadow, tall, thin, stretched across the trees. And when the light hit it, it moved. They ran, left their gear, their tent, their packs. They didn't stop until they hit the road. But weeks later, one of them got a package. No return address. Inside was a bundle of sticks, and taped to it was another page from the hiker's journal. This one read, "It's not the forest, it's what lives in it." Some legends end with a whisper. This one grows louder, because the gifts didn't stop. Marissa, the girl from the trip, transferred to another city. She thought she was safe, until the knocks began. And when she opened her door, there it was. A bundle of sticks. She threw it away. But the next night another appeared, and another. Sometimes outside her apartment, sometimes inside. Once stood on her pillow. Then came the notebook. Every page filled with the same words, written in her handwriting. It knows your name, but she had never written them. Chris, the other student, claimed he heard footsteps circling his dorm every night. His friends laughed, until they heard it too. One swore they saw a shadow under his door. Chris whispered, "It doesn't want to scare me anymore. It wants to come in." And then one night, he vanished. His bed neatly made, his backpack untouched. The only thing left was a note taped to his door. His own handwriting, "It's not in the forest anymore." And the hiker who started it all? One winter night, neighbors saw his lights flickering. Police forced entry. The living room was freezing. In the center was a pile of stones. On top, his missing journal page. Scrawled across it, in a hand no one could identify, were 3 words. "I found you." The hiker was gone. The doors were locked. No footprints in the snow. And here's the part no one wants to believe. The gifts have spread. Bundles of sticks. Stones stacked on doorsteps. Notebook pages written by hands that swear they never touched them. It's as if by listening to the story, by repeating it aloud, you invite it closer. The Appalachian Stalker isn't tied to the woods anymore. It's listening, it's waiting, it's watching. And maybe, just maybe, it's already found you. So tell me, what would you do if you woke up tomorrow and saw a small bundle of sticks waiting outside your door? Because if this story is true, and if you've listened this far, it already knows your name. If this story gave you chills, subscribe for more real horror tales. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now let's get into the next story. Imagine this. You step into an old southern mansion. The air smells faintly of dust and wood polish. Sunlight pours through tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floors. And then you see it. Dark stains on the wood. They don't scrub out. They never have. Because they aren't water. They aren't paint. They are blood. Blood spilled in one single night of horror so violent. The echoes of it are said to haunt this house forever. This isn't just a ghost story. This is history. This is the Carnton Mansion of Franklin, Tennessee, and it might be one of the bloodiest haunted places in America. Let's go back. It was November 30th, 1864. The U.S. Civil War had been raging for years, tearing the nation apart. Towns burned, families split against each other, entire cities reduced to rubble. But that night in Franklin, everything changed. Almost 20,000 men clashed in a single battle. Cannons roared, gunfire lit the darkness, and in just 5 hours more than 9,000 were killed or wounded. The McGavock family, owners of Carnton, had no choice. Their home was seized, turned into a field hospital overnight. Imagine the chaos. Hundreds of bleeding soldiers carried through the doorways, the screams of men echoing up the stairwell, the smell of iron and blood so strong it stung the back of your throat. Surgeons set up in the bedrooms upstairs. They worked with saws, knives, no anesthesia, only whiskey and leather straps to bite down on. Limb after limb thrown out the windows into piles on the lawn. And the blood. Oh, the blood. It soaked into the floorboards so deep that over a century later, the stains remain. Permanent scars in the wood. Would you dare to stand in that room, knowing hundreds of men died screaming beneath your feet? But the war ended long ago. Why then do so many swear the soldiers never left? Visitors to Carnton Mansion have reported strange things for decades. Some hear the sound of boots marching across the upstairs landing. Heavy, purposeful footsteps, as if phantom soldiers are still being rushed into surgery. Others have seen full apparitions, pale figures in torn gray and blue uniforms, drifting silently through doorways before vanishing into thin air. One woman said she felt someone brush against her in the parlor. A hand, cold, firm, but when she turned, the room was empty. Another swore she heard ragged breathing behind her shoulder, so close she felt the warmth of it. Yet no one was there. And then there are the shadows. Tour guides have locked the house for the night, only to look back and see figures standing in the windows. Faces pale, eyes hollow, watching. Some guests even claim that their photographs capture what the eye cannot, faint silhouettes in the mirrors, blurred faces hovering just behind them. Would you dare look at your reflection in a house like this? Or would you be too afraid of what might be looking back? No, dear. But the house is only half the story. Step outside, just past the porch, and you'll find the McGavock Confederate Cemetery. Nearly 1,500 soldiers lie buried there, row upon row of nameless dead. Carrie McGavock, the mistress of Carnton, dedicated the rest of her life to tending these graves. People called her the Widow of the South. But some believe Carrie never truly left. Visitors claim they've seen her ghost wandering the rows of tombstones, dressed in black mourning clothes, her figure drifting silently between the markers. She doesn't speak. She doesn't look at you. She just tends the graves. But when people describe the feeling of seeing her, they all say the same thing. It doesn't feel peaceful. It feels heavy, sad, endless grief that even death couldn't end. And the land itself carries the scars. Some nights when the fog rolls in low and heavy, shadows flicker between the headstones. Torches where no light exists. Silhouettes of soldiers trudging through the mist, still marching to their final rest. Locals say if you listen closely, you can hear faint voices carried on the wind. Prayers, last words, sometimes screams. And then there's the dripping. Yes, the dripping. Caretakers have sworn that at night, when the house is silent, they hear drops hitting the floor, one after another, as if blood is still falling from the surgeon's tables above. No one can find the source, but in those upstairs rooms, the floorboards are still stained. No matter how many times they're scrubbed, sanded, or polished, the blood won't leave. One caretaker once shared a story. He was locking up late, alone in the house. As he passed the upstairs bedroom, he heard the boards creak. He looked back and saw a man standing in the corner, a Confederate soldier, his face pale and sunken, his eyes hollow, his uniform torn and soaked in blood. The soldier turned his head slowly and locked eyes with him, and then in a breath, dissolved into smoke. Would you have gone back in that room the next day? Carnton is more than a museum. It's more than a relic of war. It's a tomb, a monument to suffering carved into wood and earth. Some believe the soldiers are trapped, reliving their final moments. Others say the ground itself is cursed, poisoned by the sheer weight of death. But one thing is certain, when you walk inside Carnton, you don't walk in alone. So here's the question. Would you spend the night in that upstairs bedroom, the one where hundreds of amputations took place? Would you dare walk across those stained floors, knowing exactly what caused the marks beneath your feet? Or worse, would you lie down in the dark, listening for footsteps in the hall? Because if you ever visit Franklin, Tennessee, you may hear them. You may feel a hand on your arm, and you may just find the soldiers of Carnton are still here. If this story gave you chills, subscribe for more real horror tales. But don't get too comfortable, because next time, we're heading to another state, and trust me, what waits there is even darker. Hit follow and be ready. The next horror begins soon.